We're good, dude. Something all right. Yo, good morning. Welcome to the Stochastic.com MLB Strategy Show. Monday, April Fool's Day, huh? All right. Well, this is here's your April Fool's, right? Here's your April Fool's joke. By the way, happy to have you guys with us. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. Atone for your sins here on a Monday morning. Coming back from Easter Sunday, it's the right thing to do. And of course, subscribe to the channel. Help us get to 100,000 subscribers. If you're watching or listening after the fact, leave a comment down below. We see you out there for sure. Always try and read and respond to them. And if you want to listen in podcast form, we throw these straight up to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. We got you covered if you don't want to listen on YouTube. Anyway, the real April Fool's joke here with Matthew Bellman. Good to be back with you, brother. Fantasy Tips Matt on Twitter. I'm at Lafayette_D. Is that this is day 5 of the season. So what does that mean? You got Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then, Matt, you have all of your guys that are 5th in the rotation going on the same day. Now, of course, you'll have off days and you'll have all of this stuff. And by, a week from now or 2 weeks from now, none of this will matter. You'll have aces, you'll have scrubs, nothing matters. But on the 5th day of the season, where a lot of teams are playing 5 straight days, you've got essentially all number 5 starters going on a 7-game slate.
A few outliers in there. And I'll say this, man, I don't know how closely you followed the first 5 days of MLB, but the first to second day, I feel like there was a huge drop down in pitcher strength just from opening day to day 2. Certainly, as you said, no off days yet. All these teams throwing out their 4th, 5th starters. I feel like maybe a couple guys have fallen through the cracks and are just starting a little bit later in the rotation, like a Tristan McKenzie, but that's it. There's a bunch of guys on here that I'm sure are going to be unfamiliar names to a lot of people watching and playing.
Yeah, and look, this isn't to say that all of these guys stink. Some of them, have the potential to be good, but it's a unique day any time of the year where you get this day 5. Like you said, a few guys will slip through the cracks and end up starting, but by and large, like these are not your prototypical aces or even top of the rotation guys. Now, to be fair, we had some of these guys like on opening day, that opening day, some of these teams threw out some guys where you go, whoa. Crochet, though, ended up having a great start. There were a few of these guys that ended up being great. So anything's possible, but I think you'd agree. Some of the guys that we're getting today are either just like objectively not very good or have not been good yet. Like you have guys, Emerson Hancock today with a strikeout prop of 3.5 with the under juiced heavily. Keaton Wynn against the Dodgers. He showed flashes last year and could see some decent strikeout stuff, but at the same time, strikeout prop juiced heavily under for 3.5, 5.3 run implied total for the Dodgers today. And those are just a couple of guys I'm talking about. And ownership, I think, Matt, before we actually dive into this slate, kind of bears out exactly what you and I are saying, where you have 3, 4, 5, and this happens on a lot of slates, but you have 8 guys sub 10% and 5 of them sub 5%. And it's only a 7-game slate.
Yeah, it's a weird dynamic. I'm thinking about how you put it with day 5 of the season. It's so true. Like we won't see this again because as you mentioned, a lot of times one team's 5th starter will be matched up with another team's ace, vice versa. But because all these teams have only played 4 games max, we're seeing the back end of their rotation here. So yeah, all these guys aren't scrubs, but when you're looking at guys like Reese Olson and Tanner Houck as the most like proven pitchers on the slate, I know that's a little bit hyperbole, but still like James Paxton and Sean Manaea, the top 2 guys in the top pitcher tool, I think that tells you all you need to know about this slate.
Yeah, and I mean, look, if this were 4 years ago, you'd go, man,
Sure.
Why is Paxton pitching on day 5?
Right.
That's not the case anymore. And even consider it from a pricing perspective, Matt. Like on FanDuel, Tristan McKenzie, 9,200, Reese Olson, 8,700. No one above 9,200. And then on DraftKings, similarly, your highest priced pitcher is a $9,000 McKenzie. You couldn't even really pay up for pitching if you wanted to today.
No, you couldn't. Salary seems like a non-issue as far as starting pitchers go. Certainly if you want expensive stacks, and there are a couple expensive stacks, maybe it's a consideration. But as you mentioned, like there isn't even one guy that's really expensive. So not even much of a consideration, which I guess is nice.
Yeah, right. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just a, interesting dynamic with a slate like this. You ready to dive into it?
Yeah, let's get after it.
All right. And as always, like I said, happy you guys are here. Hit that thumbs up. We'll have live before lock tonight. Of course, NBA live before lock as well. I think like 6 games today. Jake said the injury list is chock full of studs. Yeah, dude. That's why I went back and looked, this is one of the more unique opening days that we've ever seen, because so many guys were making their first ever opening day start, and not necessarily because it was fully warranted, not to say they were bad, but because guys that would have made those starts in the past are on the injured list. It's crazy, Matt, how many guys are hurt right now.
It's crazy how many guys are hurt. And I also just feel like the depth of starting pitching is a little bit weak. I know there's a lot of younger guys that are coming up that could potentially be really good, but I feel like some of the mainstay veterans are no longer good. So we're in that kind of middle part where we're waiting for some of these young guys to actually be good.
Let's kick it off. First game up. Of course, DraftKings and FanDuel both not including the 650 games. I wasn't sure how they were going to play that. There's a bunch of those, before 7 o'clock, but after the afternoon game. So we just have 7 to talk about, which is fine by me. Detroit at New York Mets. So the Tigers have a 3.6 implied total against Sean Manaea. So no surprise here that Manaea is getting considerable ownership. Again, that speaks to it speaks to the lack of depth, or the dearth of talent at pitcher on this slate. Not to say Manaea is bad, but 40% going to him on DraftKings right now, a 2-pitcher site. On the other side, Reese Olson is getting 20%. Coming off a season, first year in majors, where he made 18 starts, threw over 100 innings. He had a 24.5% strikeout rate. Not bad. 7.8% walk rate. When you look at some of these numbers, he didn't have a bad season. 391 xFIP, 401 FIP. These were some decent numbers from him, getting 20%. Obviously not as good a matchup as Manaea has, and that's pretty evident in the run total here, 3.6 to the Tigers. But also only a 4-run total in a pretty pitcher-friendly park, and not exactly warm weather this type of year in the Northeast for the Mets. So both pitchers getting some ownership on this slate. You're muted, Matt.
Sorry about that. I know the totals would say I'm off here, but I think you could make the case that Olson's in the better spot than Manaea. I mean, both these offenses aren't great. Not going to be surprised at all if we see Detroit be the better offense amongst these two teams. I like Detroit this year. I've talked about that a bunch on shows I've been on. I've wrote about them. I think their lineup is improving, and I think their rotation is as well. I'm a huge Tariq Skubal guy. He's their number 1. Olson looks to be emerging as their number 2 guy. He was pretty good, as you mentioned, last year. Followed that up with a good spring. Good matchup against the Mets team that isn't great. He's expensive, so I wouldn't say he's like my favorite pitcher on the slate. But Manaea is, just between the two guys, I guess on a points per dollar perspective, maybe Manaea is the safer choice, but I like Olson more in tournaments just because of that ownership. It's funny. We see this with starters sometimes who go up and then they fall down. I think of a guy like Lance Lynn, who at sometimes he's like one of the top pitchers on the slate. And then a couple months later, a year later, he's like a gas can. That's Sean Manaea. We've seen him be a 8 to 9K pitcher before. We've seen him be a 5 to 6K pitcher. Not exactly sure which Manaea we're going to get for the Mets. He was also pretty good this spring. Not that you want to take too much into that. I like the matchup for Manaea. I don't think I like it as much as the field, though.
I understand where you're coming from. I do. I will say the one nice thing about Manaea, whether you want to read into this or not, is fine by me one way or the other. But 82 pitches in his last spring training appearance. Like, this guy clearly stretched out to the point where if he's cruising, and look, I'm with you. I like the Tigers this year too. I also think you're still looking at a potential like up and down type of year. there's so much talent there and then so much unproven talent to where, like, you remember opening day, like, all right, man, I had a lot of Tiger stacks that day for sure. They're going up against a guy that nobody thought would be starting to open the season. And they finished with what, like 1 run or 2 runs or something like that. It's a 162 game season, so that doesn't mean much, but yeah, Manaea, 82 pitches his last time out. His strikeout stuff is what was, pretty appealing to me. Just looking at a guy where you go, all right, Sean Manaea, what was it, San Francisco last year? They oftentimes limited his workload. They used him in long relief a lot, right?
Yeah, it was weird. I know that the Giants do a lot of weird stuff, or they did under Gabe Kapler with their pitching staff and their lineup. He was working out a long relief a ton. He was opening some, not the usual Sean Manaea role we'd seen in the past. So I'm kind of with you. I think we'll see the Manaea that we'd seen, like the Oakland Manaea, if you will.
Yeah, I think so too. And he had a 26% K rate last year. So I get why he's getting the ownership. Also understand why you like Olsen for tournaments, but the only drawback I think for Manaea is the fact that the ownership on him is massive right now.
Yeah, and all your points are very well taken. Like, at the end of the day, I don't love the 40% Manaea ownership, but I understand it. And I'm never one that's like, I need to get away from the chalk pitchers. Like, pitching is so projectable. I don't love Manaea, but there isn't any pitcher on this slate I love, so it makes sense.
But I think we both agree that just looking at this slate, these are 2 of the guys that you're going to want to get to today.
Easily. I mean, Sean Manaea has over a 25% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on the slate. I mean, that's high.
Massive.
Like, for any pitcher, that's high. So yeah, I'm with you.
But on the other side of this game, you've got Detroit with the 2nd lowest top stack probability, ahead of only the Seattle Mariners. Just looking at our top stack tool right now, there's not a lot to get excited about as far as bats go. The Mets, 5% top stack probability. That's at the bottom 5 of this slate. And neither of these look great really anywhere. Even when you're talking like, all right, value score, they're both kind of middle of the road there. Again, looking at the top stack tool, you guys know where to find it. And then stack score, both of them, Mets middle of the road towards the bottom, Detroit very much towards the bottom. To me, I have even a tough time trying to get cute going to bats here, more specifically going to stacks.
Yeah, same. I like the idea of Detroit because Manaea is getting so much love, but top stack tool does not like them at all. I think that's the only merit in Detroit here, is that Manaea is getting a lot of love.
Sure.
It's baseball. Weird shit happens all the time. I guess my big problem is, like, even if Manaea isn't good, Detroit is not one of these teams that's going to hit a ton of home runs.
Right.
So I don't love that for them anyways. I think that if I think the better idea is not playing Manaea as opposed to stacking Tigers, excuse me. But at the end of the day, I think Manaea is just the best play here.
Agreed. Yeah. And look, he's not a guy like last year, right around 1 home run per 9. It's not like he was giving up a ton of power either.
Right.
So yeah, not a big fly ball pitcher, not great weather. I did want to look to see if rain was headed towards this game, because I'm in like the suburbs of Philadelphia and we're getting rain all week, including today.
I think I think the only bad weather spots are two of the early games. So it doesn't look like anything as of now.
Okay, cool. Should be good then. All right, let's keep it moving then, Matt. We'll go to where are we at next? We go to Toronto and Houston. All right, Bowden Francis, Ronel Blanco, 2 righties, 4.9 run implied total for Houston, 4.3 for Toronto. Francis is interesting. First of all, Houston coming off a 4-game, they got swept 4 games at home at the hands of the Yankees. So that's tough. Now Toronto comes into town. Francis did add a splitter to try and, control lefties, because that was, you look last year, he made, I think, 36 1/3 innings, all of which were in relief. This will be his first major league start. Decent strikeout stuff, but not nearly as good against lefties. So, that leads us to guys like Alvarez and Tucker and such. Yeah, the Astros have struggled out of the gate, but we know they're a good team. We know they don't strike out at a high clip at all, be it lefties or righties. What are you doing with Francis today?
I think both sides are in play. Houston obviously in play because they're going to be in play against basically anyone. Francis is certainly unproven considering this is his first start. This is another guy, and again, I don't want to take too much into this, but I'm of the belief it means something, if not everything. He was really, really good this spring. Like 3.38 ERA, 15 to 4 K to walk ratio, pitched over 18 innings. Like that's not Spencer Strider level good, but it's pretty good for a 7K starter who has upside. That said, I always really struggle to use pitchers against Houston, not only because Houston's really good, but because they don't strike out a lot.
At all. Yeah.
I think the case for Francis is just that there aren't many good pitchers on this slate. So he's cheap. If he pitches well, you might not need like the 25 plus from your starter today. I think you can get that elsewhere, though. I'm a little bit more hesitant on the Houston bats than I think the field is, knowing full well. I mean, this lineup is like, I don't care that they started 0-4. They're Alvarez, Tucker, Bregman, Altuve. These guys are elite. So if you want to stack Houston, do your thing. I think a couple other stacks look slightly better, but they're in the mix as the top stack on the board, no doubt.
Yeah, 4 straight losses to start the season means nothing at all. Like, dude, I remember the Phillies had a 5-0 lead against the Rangers last year in the season opening day, and they lose. They lost the whole series. They started the season off like brutally bad, right? And then you go to the NLCS or whatever it was. Like you could take, it's 162 games.
Yeah.
It really means nothing. Matter of fact, I have Yordan Alvarez over 1.5 total base. They just did the underdog MLB pick 'em short over there on Odd Shopper. If you guys are into that type of stuff, which you should be, I like this spot for him because, you know, like you mentioned, Francis, unproven but had a good spring. This is his first career start against Houston, a team that makes contact, is going to put the ball in play. I know Alvarez, along with the rest of the Astros, has gotten off to a rough start, but I mean, this guy's just so good and he dominates righties. By the way, link to Underdog in the description and in the chat. 100% first match deposit bonus instantly. If you're using that and you wanted to go over there. I don't know if you play on Underdog, but to me, if you're talking about the offers that they have there, right? You've got the pick'em, particularly for people in non-legal betting states, right? Where you can up to 20x your entry, and you've got, you know, higher on lower on everything from baseball, basketball, football, all of those sports. But also the best ball, like best ball to me, I don't know if you, I'm huge into best ball. They have the daily drafts, which in PA, of course, I can do. So you're doing like daily drafts for NBA with huge prize pools as well. MLB, NFL, all of that stuff. So they've got like 8 different formats over there, and they just keep adding to it. It just keeps getting better. So as far as these like Pick'em, DFS, fantasy, daily sites go, I don't think you could find a better one than Underdog right now.
I'm with you, especially like you said, the offers they put out there. It's a second to none.
And the free squares too. So you're always getting free squares out there if you're a new user. So like I said, link in the description and in the chat, up to $100 first match deposit bonus. That is instant, by the way. You do nothing else outside of sign up and deposit. But Houston bats, I think we have to at least talk about this a little bit, right? Because while they have the 4th highest top stack probability, you're never going to get them as a great value team. But some of these guys are just way too good. Who cares about a 4-game skid to start the season for us to totally ignore them?
Definitely can't totally ignore them. I mean, they're going to always look good against a starter like this because they're proven. Francis is certainly not. They're at home again. I will say, the difficult part for me when you look at the Astros, and again, if you're multi-entering, you definitely want some Astros exposure. As someone who plays limited lineups, I look at their price tags. They're expensive. So if you're playing the Astros, you're not getting the teams like Arizona, the Dodgers, 2 other teams right in their range as far as the top stack tool goes. So I don't think it's as much about Houston for me if I don't play them as it is liking those other teams more. That said, like we know the upside Houston has on any given day. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if, you know, like you said, they've been struggling a little bit. As soon as they get going, they just massively go off.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. When they do click, you're like, oh, yeah, there's Houston. Yeah.
You see that in MLB a lot, I feel like.
Oh, all the time, dude. And I will say, I'm actually getting, so I just ran the Sims. ran the contest generator, ran the Sims, 25% the first, and favored at 150 lineups. I'm actually getting 12% Houston 5-mans, 2% Houston 4-mans, and 7% Houston 3-man stacks. And then I went and just looked at individual exposures here. I have a decent amount of Houston bats. And I think, look, I haven't dug too far into like roster construction yet, but if I had to guess, a decent amount of the reason is because Manaea's 7,800 and none of these pitchers are really that expensive. So it's going to open some things up. I have 30% Diaz right now, 23% Kyle Tucker, 23% Yordan Alvarez, 17% Altuve, 14% Pena. So I am actually getting, the Sims are getting me to a decent amount of Houston. And I think it's probably because pitchers aren't going to cost you an arm and a leg today.
That's so true. And a couple other reasons why it might be happening, aside from those big guys that you mentioned, which are expensive, they've got cheap filler pieces. Yainer Diaz at catcher, McCormick, Jeremy Pena isn't expensive. And then also, even their expensive guys, like 56 and 5,500 for Alvarez and Tucker, that's not cheap. But we've seen these guys over 6K before. Like, we've seen them plenty of times be the highest priced outfielders on any slate they're on. They're like 5th and 6th highest, 6th and 7th highest today, which matters.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also, they have one of the highest implied totals on the slate as well, right? It's sitting that we have it in the top stack tool at 5.2. So it's up there. So yeah, I do like Houston. It's a tricky spot because Francis could just be really good. He could also just not be good in this start against Houston, his first career major league start. So yeah. What are you doing with Blanco? I'm actually getting a decent amount. I'm getting more than him than I expected.
Yeah, I think it just fits the mold of basically every pitcher on this slate, even the guys that are quote unquote proven or have been good in the past, like James Paxton, are big question marks. So when you have a guy like Blanco, who is the cheapest pitcher on the slate, certainly much more solid than spectacular. I don't love the matchup. Tools obviously like Toronto a lot. I get it, just because whether it's Blanco or Francis, I do feel like Manaea is probably in another category just because of the matchup, the price tag, and what we've seen from him in the past. But basically every other pitcher on the slate outside of McKenzie, there's serious question marks with. So when you can get those same question marks, but spend a couple grand less as the cheapest guy in the slate, I get it, if nothing else.
Yeah, and you also, I guess, can't really ignore the fact either that, wins matter. Wins will get you points, and they're decent favorites on the money line at home, right? Like north of a 5-run implied total. What do we have the implied total at for Toronto, right?
5.1.
Yeah, so that pretty close.
Yeah.
This really, given the context of the slate, just knowing that we don't have a lot of good pitchers, this feels like the type of night where you're probably going to get some Blanco and also get Toronto, obviously not in the same lineup, but also get decent exposure to Toronto bats as well.
Most definitely. They both have upside. Blanco, a big part is the price tag, 6,500. I mean, this means nothing. It was against AAA Sugarland, but in 4 innings or 4 1/3 in his last exhibition outing, he struck out 10. So certainly there's a little bit of strikeout upside in there at 6,500. And yeah, it's a tough spot, but we're seeing that basically throughout the entire slate. A lot of unproven guys in tough spots.
Yeah, you're right. Like you could talk about Olsen, you could talk who's more expensive. You could talk about Blanco. You could talk about probably more than half of them and go, yeah, they're viable today, but so is their opponent.
Yeah, so, exactly.
I'm with you. How much Toronto do you think you get? Because I'm getting 30% Blanco, but also 11% 5-man Blue Jays, 5% 4-man, 5% 3-man. So my stack exposure, I will say, is very spread out. I'm not surprised by that at all, just given how many question mark, as Matt put it, pitchers there are on this slate. But I think I'm just going to have an assortment of everything on either side.
I think that makes sense, at least right now, with the way the tools are showing.
Right.
And I'll say this about Toronto. It's kind of the opposite of Houston. They're coming in hot. I know they had a bunch of success in Tampa in their first series. I don't care. Like, I'm certainly not playing them because of that. but I'd rather see that than a team that started out struggling. So I think there's some merit in Toronto starting off the season hot, knowing that their lineup is really good. I like Toronto here a lot. I think the ownership is warranted. It's funny, our top stack tool lays it out exactly how you just put it. It's very, very spread out in terms of not only the top stack percentages, but also the ownerships.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no way you're ignoring Toronto bats here. I
No.
mean, Blanco gave up north of 2 home runs per 9 last year. He had a ground ball rate of 34%. If these balls are getting put in play, you're going to see a lot of fly balls and a lot of hard contact. So yeah, I'm with you, man. What was his? I just want to see his contact rates real quick before. Yeah, 12% soft contact last year. It's not good.
Mm-mm.
I like them both. You could see a lot of bats going, and you're not going to get them cheap, but it's a good spot. I think the only spot I'm probably not getting too much of is going to be Francis in this whole game.
Yeah, I don't hate Francis either. He looks good from a contrarian perspective. I doubt I'll like put that into action here as someone who plays limited lineups, but I get the appeal for him just because you go down this slate. I mean, yeah, Ronel Blanco against the Jays doesn't look great. Francis doesn't look great against Houston, but Keaton Wynn against the Dodgers, as you mentioned earlier, Matt Waldron against the Cardinals. Like, these are just a lot of the same thing.
Yeah, man. I have 11% Francis right now, so not like getting none, but I figured you'd find this, you guys viewing this as well might find this interesting. So I have, and for those of you that have the Sims tool or have the lineup generator, probably already discovered this yourself. But Matt, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pitchers with double-digit exposure right now. That's half the slate.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say it doesn't make sense though when you've got just so many iffy options, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Now we can get to a game where I think we'll probably focus less on pitching, because those first two we had to dig into it quite a bit. New York Yankees, excuse me, Arizona Diamondbacks, Louis Gill, Ryan Nelson. We have both of these guys pulling sub 2% ownership. I just can't imagine that you're going to be looking to get to Ryan Nelson today in this spot. Against the Yankees, it's just very difficult to see that being the case. Or Gill against Arizona, that we have with the highest top stack probability, highest implied total. Are you seeing anything that I'm not? Because this is tough to get the pitching.
Yeah, no. The price tags aren't even, they don't even stand out on a slate where every pitcher's cheap. Heel has shown upside before for the Yankees, but this is not the spot.
Is that how you pronounce it? Heel?
I think it's heel.
You're
I think I
probably
remember
right.
that from last year.
You're probably right. I don't remember it from last year.
I wasn't even, did you say Gill? Is that why you?
Yeah, that's exactly what I said.
Yeah, I think that I might sound like an idiot, but I just think I remember it being called heel, which is why I said
I'll defer
like
to you here.
And then Nelson, no. So this is definitely a game where, see, this is the problem, when you said you certainly don't want to skip Toronto on this, and you don't. If you're multi-entering, you don't. It's just a matter of how high you rank the Astros and Blue Jays, the Diamondbacks and Yankees, because I think that these two offenses look like two of the top offenses on the slate, specifically Arizona, who's been really good. They're priced pretty fairly, top stack on the board. So yeah, this game's all about offense for me.
Heel. Yeah, I just looked it up on Baseball Reference. All right. You have to look towards the offenses though today. I don't really see how you get away from this, right? Like, the only question then becomes like, all right, now we basically talked about some of the highest price stacks, and we were like, yeah, all of these look really good, which I think is probably why I'm getting a decent amount of Blanco and some of these other cheap pitchers. Not in this game, but yeah. How do you not like Arizona? How do you not like the Yankees? I guess at this point, the question to you isn't, hey, do you like these guys? But more so, how do you prioritize these top priced stacks today?
Right. So the weird thing about the Yankees for me, Nelson is the lowest pitcher in the top pitcher tool. The Yankees are like only mid-tier as far
I
as
know.
top stack tool goes. That might be because they're so expensive, namely Soto and Judge. I talked about Houston being a little bit cheaper than they normally are. Soto and Judge are two of the three highest priced outfielders on the slate. So when those guys are priced ahead of guys like Corbin Carroll and Alvarez, I understand why that might lower their, optimal percentage a little bit. That said, pricing in baseball is, I don't want to say irrelevant, but if Soto and Judge combine for 3 home runs, it doesn't matter how much they cost. You need them. So I think there's merit in the Yankee stack. And while they don't grade out as high as I, thought they might from a top stack tool perspective, unlike Detroit, this is a team that when they go off, they will hit home runs. So I think there's merit to using the Yankees every day.
Yeah. And also, I mean, you've added Juan Soto, who's already off to a scorching hot start. You have massive power. Sure, you have some strikeouts in this lineup, massive power. But the one thing I keep coming back to is that Nelson cannot generate strikeouts. The guy does not generate swings and misses. So I mean, something has to give here, right? You're talking about someone that 8% swinging strike rate, Matt, 8% swinging strike rate, 15% K rate, 8% K minus BB rate last year, with north of home runs per 9 for Nelson last year was 1.5. Like this is one of those spots where if the Yankees get going, they could. I guess I'm a little bit surprised to see them so. I know they're expensive, but I guess I'm a little bit surprised to see them so low in the top stack tool. Just knowing the power upside against the guy that is not a ground ball pitcher. Number one, I could look at something and go, all right, well, he strikes out 15% of pitchers or hitters, but he has a 54% ground ball rate. Kind of cancels itself out a little bit. But 36% ground ball rate for Nelson last year, 44% fly balls. There's really nothing redeeming here to make me look and go, oh, I see why the Yankees aren't getting a lot of love.
I can't figure out why they're so low in the top stack tool either. Because yeah, my first instinct is that they're really expensive. So I'm sure that has something to do with it. But it's not even a case where like a lot of times you'll see this and the 6th ranked team in the top stack tool is percentage, 1% lower than the top stack. This one, like the Yankees are right in line with the Mets and the Giants and the Cardinals. Like I don't see it that way. I see them more in line with the Diamondbacks, Blue Jays, Astros. This is one where like if it stays like this up to lock, I'll probably defer to the tools because they know more than I do. That said, like I think there's more power upside than the tools are giving them credit for.
Yeah, defer to the tools, but be scared shitless going into it, knowing that you
Right.
like Yankees exposure.
Right.
I hear you. What is that? A golden doodle you got back there?
I do. Yeah. I was telling Jordan a week ago, a pipe burst in our house. So having a ton of work done on it. It flooded the basement and all that. So that we have workers downstairs. So the dog is scared and is following me everywhere.
Yeah, was I right though? Is that a golden doodle?
Yeah, it's a mini golden doodle. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I have a lot of friends that have. They're all hyperallergenic dogs. They don't shed. Yeah.
My sister and mom both very allergic to dogs. So
Yep.
I don't live with them anymore, obviously, but still was a consideration.
They're good dogs. They're good dogs. Yeah, Yankee bats. I honestly, man, I may make some like ROI boost just to the stats to see if I can, because you can go into the contest generator or into the lineup, the pre-contest simulator, and just go into stack boosts. And if you're like, all right, I'm not getting any Yankees, I want to at least have a little bit of this. I don't mind tamping down maybe a bit of Houston or Toronto to get some Yankees. That's one way to do it. And I don't think that's crazy.
I don't think it's crazy either. I just cannot figure out why they're not higher in the top stack tool, because I also feel like they are really expensive. They have the lowest top value stack on the slate, but that's baked into their stack score, not even their top stack percentage. So I'm on the MLB show again tonight. I'll, keep doing research on this as the day goes on.
Yeah, for sure. And for what it's worth, 5.3 run implied total for the Yankees. It's a good spot.
Yeah.
And guys, by the way, if you're still not there yet, promo code DINGER, it'll be there for you, right? If the link in the description and in the chat, not just the Sims, any package you want, weekly or monthly, whether it's the Sims tools with all the Sims tool gets you everything, like the ownership, player projections, top stack tool, Sims contest generator, post lineup simulator, which you should definitely be digging into each day after the contests are over. Get you everything, premium Discord. So when I say Sims tool, it's everything. That link will get you 30% off whatever you want. Even if you just are like, you know what? I know the MLB lineup generator crushed for everybody last year. I want to get in at a reasonable cost, start with some small tools, maybe work my way up to the Sims and to the other stuff. 30% off that as well for the week. All of that down there. That's where you can find it. This expires on Wednesday. So it's to open the season, 30% off everything. This expires on Wednesday. So if you're still not in yet, any package you want, weekly or monthly, we got you covered. 30% discount, 30% discount applied to all of that. Premium Discord included with all of that as well. And I should say, for those of you who over the years were like, hey, I just want the data. I just want the projections, the ownership, the top stacks tool, the Discord. I just want all of that, but I don't want the Sims. We have the all access data package too, not just for baseball, but it includes every sport. So you've got that if that's what you're looking for. And we tossed in for free a light version of the Sims so you can check out for yourself. So as always, link down there in the description chat. You ever have any questions on any of these packages, which to do, my DMs are always open. And Greg's done some awesome tutorials on all these tools that you can find on the site and on YouTube. Done on Wednesday, so get in. All right. And the great thing about baseball is you got it every single day, unlike football. So no matter when you do it, you got baseball, multiple slates every single day. I just want to ask you, go ahead. What's that?
Do you have a dog?
I do.
How was, real quick, because I know we got to move on, the relationship between your dog and the babies when you had them?
She took a finger off the one when she was little, but aside from that, good.
Okay.
I'm joking, Matt.
No, I was like, I was kind of overlooking the finger thing, figuring that was.
No, yeah, she's been great with it. Kind of apathetic at first, but then like my 3-year-old, they're best friends now. They love each other. And then the 4-month-old, she's, you know, she comes up, sniffs her, maybe gives her a lick or whatever, but very gentle around them.
Okay.
Dogs are dumb. We can pretend as much as we want that they're not.
My dog hates my daughter.
What?
My dog like hates my daughter because she's jealous.
Oh, really?
Yeah. My daughter like pulls her a little bit. So it's like just created now that she's a little bit older, like it's getting a lot better. Because my daughter loves the dog. Like all she talks about is Maisie, Maisie, Maisie.
Yep. Which it'll change. But dogs are dumb, man. And I love my dog to death. But when I had kids is when I realized, like, wait, man, I always used to be like, hey, dogs are kind of smart. They're dumb.
Same.
They're dumb. You see a kid grow and mature.
What they can start doing.
And they start doing things. Dogs work in reverse, man.
Yeah.
Your kids, your dogs get dumber and more of a problem. So, as much as I love them, and yes, there's a few very intelligent breeds out there.
Sure.
All I'm saying, mine's not one of them.
Yeah, same. And it's like it's little stuff like we have to tell Ellie, if you give something to Maisie, you can't take it back. You know what I mean? And Maisie doesn't realize that like Ellie's just playing a game. She's not smart enough, you know? Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they'll get the hang of it. Hopefully.
Okay.
Anyway. Any other thoughts on Arizona before we move on?
Nah, they look great. I mean, their offense is clicking on all cylinders already, put up a ton of runs to start the season. Their lineup is loaded. Obviously, they went to the World Series last year. It looks like they've come back, you know, not skipping a beat. Lourdes Gurriel is probably the hottest hitter in baseball to start the season. Their lineup is filled with power and speed. They're running also. They look like the top stack on the board. And as of right now, ownership isn't even there. I've struggled to buy that because, in my opinion, they look really good. They've been popular on every slate they've been on, mostly afternoon slates. So for our tools, I think they're the top stack in tournaments, or one of the top stacks in cash games. From my mind, thinking about this slate from a 30,000-foot view, I think that they're the top stack in cash games and a really good tournament stack as well.
Jake and Benny, my buddy who I was talking about that has a Golden Doodle also has a Vizsla, and those things are fast as fuck, dude. I don't know if you've ever seen those dogs. They are insanely fast. They're super thin, like long, and they can cut on a dime. Obviously you got like your greyhounds and stuff, but these Vizslas are insanely fast.
Oh yeah, they're real lanky.
Yeah, I don't know if they're smart, but they're fast. I'll tell you that much. Hasn't gotten hit by a car yet, so it can't be that dumb. Boston and Oakland. All right, so 4.4 run implied total for Oakland today. Run total for Oakland is sitting at 3.8. So I guess the simplest of questions, Tanner Houck and on the other side, Joe Boyle. Do we have any interest in pitching today? Like, is Houck someone that we should be getting to against a bad Oakland offense in a pitcher-friendly park?
I think so for sure.
Yeah.
Even we saw Carlos Carrasco wasn't great yesterday, but he was decent. The Indians pitching staff was really good against them all weekend. Houck was the Red Sox best starter this spring. 16 Ks to only 3 walks, 2.4 ERA. Again, I'm not using him because of that, but good signs in a great matchup in a great park. I think on paper, he looks like, I mean, I personally like him more than Manaea. Like, I get the Manaea ownership, but I think those two guys are probably the top 2 pitchers on the slate, with a couple other guys very close. But yeah, I like Tanner Houck a lot here.
Me too. I'm not really sure how you get away from this spot.
Same.
That's the thing, right? I'm not sure. Are there any drawbacks that are enough to be like, I don't really want to get to Tanner Houck today?
Aside from it's baseball and weird stuff happens, no.
Right, exactly.
And you're not making lineups like, because you could say that about everything. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Please go.
You could say that about any spot in baseball. Weird stuff happens, I can play them. Well, the goal is to make good lineups that make money. So yeah, weird stuff can happen, but weird stuff can happen anywhere. On paper, I think Houck looks very, very good here.
Yeah, like league average K rate, as you said, in spring, looked a little bit better than league average, but it doesn't even need to be in this spot. Yeah, it doesn't need to be. You just need, go out. Was he decent amount stretched out in spring training? Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, I'm looking right now. I'm not finding the exact number, but I was saying yesterday, I'm an MLB degen, so I was playing some MLB spring training, awful prize pools and stuff, but just wanted to keep my mind in the loop. And he was good. He was really good pitching. None of these guys were going crazy deep, but I'm pretty sure he's worked up and stretched out.
Yeah, I can't imagine he's not at this point. You're getting some ownership there, but 3.8 total for Oakland. It's a great spot. On the other side, any interest in Boyle? And if not, what are we doing with bats today?
So Boyle is one where he also was really good this spring. I sound like a broken record. I don't want to go to Boyle here just because he seems like a lot of that was probably fool's gold, although I don't know too much. First glance, Boston looks really good here. Their top stack percentage is right in line with a team like Houston, getting less ownership. As of this show, they are the highest leverage stack on the board. Bad ballpark, but tons of power in this lineup, good speed. I like Boston quite a bit in tournaments with a pitcher here who's getting ownership. So I think Boyle is getting a lot of love because of that really good spring and his price tag. I just pulled it up right now. So actually he had 3 starts toward the end of last season where he was really good. 1.69 ERA, 0.81 whip across 16 innings. But in the spring, he allowed 15 walks over 18 innings.
Dude, he walked 3 batters in 4 straight starts and went 3-3-4 in 3 innings. Those walk rates are nuts in spring.
I don't get the ownership there, not gonna lie. Like when we've got guys like Manaea, Tanner Houck that just look a lot better, even Reese Olson, McKenzie, who we'll get to in a little bit. I'm not buying the Boyle ownership. I'm more on the Red Sox side than Boyle himself.
The only thing I hate about stacking against guys that have, spotty command is, I guess you know where I'm going with this. Like,
sure.
You don't get all that many points when you walk the bases loaded.
You don't, but I look at it kind of the other way also. Like getting those walks gives you opportunities for multi RBI doubles and homers. I get your point for sure. And there's certainly
and it runs your pitch count up, and then you have to go into the bullpen early, and it's not exactly a prestigious bullpen in Oakland. So yeah. I get it. I mean, I'd rather go to Boston than Boyle.
Same, especially where the ownership is right now. Not only does Boston look good in the top stack tool, that's not even incorporating the ownership Boyle is projected to get. So on all sides. I think if I had to choose right now, Boston would be my favorite tournament stack on the board. The other thing is, and I know this doesn't mean a ton, but Boston just got done with their first series in Seattle, facing George Kirby, Bryce Miller, Logan Gilbert, 3 really good starters, and now they get Joe Boyle. Yes, please.
Yeah. And we shouldn't be reading too far in the spring training. You've already mentioned that, but my God, those walks are crazy, dude.
Yeah.
Actually, he walked. How many did he walk? What did you say? 15?
Yeah, 15 over 18 in a third innings.
Mm.
And also, he had an 18.7% walk rate in the minors. Like,
right.
Man, I think a lot of people are just buying the 3 starts he had at the end of last year. And the thing with spring training is, yeah, you have to take it all with a grain of salt. But that's more so with like older veteran guys that have been around that might be working on stuff. Like, I don't think Boyle is the type of guy that is all of a sudden not going to start walking guys because it's the regular season, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point too, because Pablo Lopez, after a tough spring, was like, I'm just working on different stuff.
Right.
Like, he goes, none of this means anything. He said that outright. Like, it doesn't matter. You know, he's throwing different pitches and counts where he wouldn't. But you're right. With guys like this, I'd say it sounds some alarm bells for sure. Any other bats? Anything else you want to talk about before we get to these final 2 games?
No, I think that Boston looks really good. And just real quick.
No thanks on Oakland bats?
No thanks on Oakland. And just real quick, like from the point you just made about spring training and Pablo Lopez, Tommy Pham, who I don't think he's not on a team right now, but on so a couple days ago, he tweeted this. He said, from watching these games with all this free time, one huge observation and speaking from experience, spring training stats do not matter. From experience and observations, most guys are trying things out. If it doesn't work by a certain time, we just revert back to old ways.
Right. But that's also proving your point. Revert back to old ways. You're talking about proven
exactly.
players. Yeah.
Right.
St. Louis, San Diego, Kyle Gibson, Matt Waldron, 4.4 run implied total for both teams, both the Cardinals and the Padres. Where are we going on either side of this game? Does anything jump off the page to you?
No, this game kind of as a whole looks like what used to be called a Manny special, where you just kind of skip it. Yeah, I'm sure you know about that. So, yeah. You know, I think my least favorite part of this game is Matt Waldron. I don't think he's that good. He's a knuckleballer, so a lot of variance in there. Certainly don't have a lot of interest in Kyle Gibson against the Padres either, but I don't have a ton of interest in the bats. Not a great ballpark. Both these teams profile much better against left-handed pitching. This is a stay away game for me.
Yeah, and I mean, we've already talked about so many teams,
right,
from an offensive perspective. Not a great park. Let's talk Cleveland and Seattle then. We'll have more time. You'll have more time on Live Before Lock to get into some of these spots that we haven't talked about. Maybe get a little bit more granular with some individual bats, but we know that when it comes to winning tournaments, you're looking to stack these teams. I do want to see what my exposures look like to these teams from a stacking perspective. I am getting some San Diego, getting no St. Louis. I am getting some San Diego though. It's interesting against Gibson. Gibson's the type of guy that I always loved him and thought that, you know, he could become really good. His breaking stuff was great, but, you know, leaned too heavily on the fastball and it just wasn't sharp and he would get crushed on that. And like the swinging strike, the swing and miss stuff on his breaking stuff was always great, Matt, but never really found a way to put all of it together. He's not bad. Just from a fantasy perspective, Gibson's never given us what I thought his potential ceiling could have been.
Definitely been a tough nut to crack from a fantasy perspective. Never been as good as you quite want him to be. Also not a guy you really like using bats against. That said, I understand the San Diego ownership or not the ownership, but why you're getting there. Because they're another example of a team with a ton of power that runs. So anytime that they can get a starter out of a game early, we saw it yesterday. I mean, they put up 15 runs on the afternoon slate, ton of home runs, stolen bases. So they're another one of these teams, kind of like the Yankees, where any day, as long as they're not facing an elite pitcher, I have no problem getting there.
Let's talk about the next one. Then we got a couple games to go here. Now we're digging into McKenzie, who you had talked about at the top of the show, kind of teased this spot. Emerson Hancock as well. 4-point run implied totals, both for the Cleveland Guardians and the Seattle Mariners. Tristan McKenzie. All right, let's dig into this a little bit because we know there's upside here for sure. He's the highest priced pitcher, both on DraftKings and on FanDuel. Is this your favorite pitcher of the night right now?
Right up there. I think I like Houck slightly more just because of the matchup.
Yeah.
Much better for Houck. The price tag is lower. I ultimately think McKenzie is the better pitcher. Like
I think Houck is safer. I think he's safer.
Definitely.
Yeah.
If I were starting my MLB team or drafting a fantasy team, I would want McKenzie, but that's not what we're doing. We're just looking at tonight. I still respect Seattle offensively. I think that they've got a lineup that has potential, if nothing else. That said, I do think talent-wise, McKenzie is the best pitcher on the slate. Didn't pitch a lot last year, was hurt. So kind of have to go back to his 2022 year, but he was filthy in 2022. Way underpriced if you're getting that McKenzie. We don't know we're getting that McKenzie. We don't know how long he's going to pitch here. So I think there's some question marks. But even with those question marks, he looks so good because of how talented he is on a slate without a lot of talent, or at least a lot of proven talent.
Yeah, 26% K rate in 2022. Last year was odd, right? I mean, we saw elevated walk rate. Strikeout rate was fine. It was fine, but are you expecting more of the 2022, 2021 version of McKenzie going into this year?
I am. Maybe that's, delusions of grandeur being a Cleveland fan because I want him to be really good. I personally think he's got the stuff to be the top guy in our rotation. Maybe I need to fall back on that notion a little bit just because of his health problems. And maybe I need to see it before I put it into practice. I just feel like, again, so many question marks on the slate. How do you not at least have some interest in McKenzie here?
Yeah, I'm with you. Do you get to anything on the other side of this one with Hancock? Because I know that there is potential in an arm like Emerson Hancock, but I don't know how you're getting to the strikeouts here. Like I mentioned right at the top of the show, under 3.5 strikeouts has heavy juice on it. And if you're going by Vegas, I pull up Odd Shopper and I'm using our market-based tool just to get bets down. I have it literally refreshing every 15 seconds here as I'm at my computer all day. And that prop earlier, I was actually talking to Adam because he had grabbed the under 3.5 at plus money last night. And now the over 3.5 is plus 120. Under 3.5 strikeouts right now is, dude, DraftKings has under 2.5 at plus 130. So they moved it down to 2.5 in some spots, but heavy, minus 174 under 3.5 strikeouts on FanDuel right now for Hancock.
Yeah, it's just a brutal spot. Also, Cleveland doesn't strike out a lot. Hancock was not good this spring. 11 runs in 9 2/3 innings. Like, again, I don't want to stack Cleveland because of that. I do think Cleveland's probably a little lower in the top stack tool than I would have thought. Ultimately, I think Hancock and Cleveland look similar in that they're just 4th, 5th, deep tournament options and nothing else.
Yeah, and that's if you're someone playing 150 lineups, maybe you stumble across some Emerson Hancock, but
maybe not though, to your point. Like maybe not.
For sure. I'll tell you right now, 150 lineups that I favorited in the contest, in the lineup simulator. Jordan has his own version that he ran that he can throw on the screen. One Hancock lineup, negative 33% simulated player ROI on Emerson Hancock right now. So not good. Not good at all. And it's also not a Cleveland team that's going to offer up many strikeouts. You know as well as I do that even when Cleveland's offense was terrible, and just going through the season, very little power. they still weren't a good team to target with pitching because they put the ball in play, even if it's weak ground balls.
Yeah, I mean, they're still like that. Their offense still sucks, but it's the same thing. They're not going to strike out a lot. And to your point, like they're a little bit better than they were last year. So yeah, it's just a brutal spot for Hancock, a guy who doesn't strike out a lot of guys anyways.
Do you look to get the bats for either Cleveland or Seattle?
Probably not. I think the Mariners side has some merit just because you're not sure exactly what you're getting from McKenzie, but that's about it. These two teams are the third lowest and lowest teams in our top stack tool. I think Cleveland, like in the back of my mind, it's like, damn, well, if Hancock's not striking anyone out and they're putting the ball in play, then maybe Cleveland could have a good game. But again, they're not a team that hits home runs. They're running more this year, which is helpful. I just think there's so many better options to get to. I will say, just after talking this out with you, I like Cleveland slightly more than I like Hancock, but that's about all the nice things I can say about them.
Appreciate you guys. 88 thumbs up, almost at 100, 12 away from 100. Gotta say, not a bad ratio for 330 people watching. We got like 27% ratio. Not bad. Thumbs up to viewers. We'll take it. Let's get over that century mark. Appreciate you guys. MLB strategy shows don't do quite as well as, like an NFL or an NBA, but we're taking time going through each one of these games, really trying to leave no stone unturned here. So we'll close it out with San Francisco and the Dodgers. Dodgers heavy favorites today, Matt. They have a 5.2 run implied total at home against Keaton Wynn. Right now, they are minus 205 on the money line. So among all of the games on this slate, this is by far your biggest money line favorite. Wynn flashed some stuff, and I know that there are some strikeouts in this lineup for the Dodgers at the bottom, but even so, like heavily juiced under on 4.5 Ks for Keaton Wynn. I don't know, man. There's so much power and talent in this lineup. Not to mention, you look at the top, two of the lefties that you're going to have to face are Ohtani and Freeman. And that's not even including some of the great righty talent with the Dodgers. Brutal spot for him today. Truly a brutal spot for Keaton Wynn.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be in the business much this year using pitchers against the Dodgers, especially pitchers like this. I just think that, again, it's the old anything can happen in baseball, but from a projectable standpoint, he doesn't look good at all. I think all these other guys we've talked about, even though they're in tough matchups like a Blanco, a Francis, none of those offenses are as good as the Dodgers.
Okay, so this is a perfect way to wrap this up then. We talked about Houston and the Yankees and who else? Arizona and some of these other teams that make for potential explosions offensively. Toronto being another one. And I'm forgetting, a few of them are slipping my mind. Where do the Dodgers rank among those today against Wynn?
I mean, right up there. I've talked about it like with San Diego and New York, teams that you can stack on any single day. I think the Dodgers are the definition of that team. They're so good. We haven't seen an offense this loaded. I mean, there's a couple really good offenses right now in baseball. They're the cream of the crop in my eyes. So I think on any given day, they're going to be right on top of that list. That said, you did mention Wynn comes with pedigree. He showed flashes last year. So I think the spots are probably better for a team like Arizona, maybe Toronto. It all looks very, very close to me, though. And I think between Arizona, Toronto, Boston, Houston, and the Dodgers, those 5 teams all look very, very good.
I mean, if you want to talk about price points, like, all right, so remember you mentioned that Houston had a bunch of those guys previously north of 6K, but now your highest price guys are like mid 7K or mid 5K. Look on DraftKings, Mookie Betts, 6,500. Shohei Ohtani, 63. Freddie Freeman, 61. Good luck trying to get 5-man, 4-man stacks with those, those 3 guys. Man, if you're doing it, you're definitely going to have to lean towards some of these middle bottom order guys. And even those are north of $4,000.
Or you're using like the Blanco,
yeah,
I don't know, Francis pitching combo or whatever, which obviously is going to come with some risk there. One guy we didn't talk about, I'm sure you're about to get to him, is Paxton, who also looks really good on the other side.
I've always been a huge James Paxton fan. There was a time there where he was the best of the best, right? And then, you talk about injuries with somebody like McKenzie. Paxton has suffered so many injuries, come back, been out. I'm the truth is with him, and I'm very curious to hear where you think on this. I never know what to think of James Paxton from season to season as somebody that always had the pedigree, but always found ways to get himself out of the starting rotation due to injury.
Really tough to figure him out, especially when he hasn't made a start this year. We do know that he's going to come with strikeout upside because he always has. And it's really encouraging to see in his last start, in spring, he went 5 innings, 80 pitches. I've also been high on Paxton. And one thing I'm going to lean on here and why I like him, I feel like the Dodgers are one of these teams, when they get their hands on guys like this, they can work magic like other teams can't, similar to like what the Orioles can do. So the Dodgers taking a shot on Paxton and starting him here is encouraging. And while I don't think he's going to go 7 innings here or throw 90 pitches, I think there's so much strikeout upside in the time he's on the mound that he looks like one of the best pitchers on the slate. Him, Houck, Manaea, and McKenzie, my top 4, I think pretty clearly.
Okay. Yeah. And you know what? I think the difference with Paxton now is that he had last year, I'm sure you remember this, but he had some real great starts. I should say pretty good starts, but also a few where I just remember him getting blown up, blown up to the point where you're going, how is this guy going out there giving up 6 runs in 1 1/3 inning, And the difference though, and where I think I ultimately agree with you, he still had a 13% swinging strike rate. He still went out there and can give you the 30% K rate, especially if he's on a team like the Dodgers. And you pointed that out. There's upside here. I think there's also downside to Paxton because there's so many intangibles with a guy like this. But yeah, putting him around the top 4 to me seems to make a lot of sense on a day where you're getting mostly you're getting mostly 5s for a lot of these teams. So Paxton looks a whole lot better than he would if you had him starting tomorrow when you're working through back to the start of the rotations.
I didn't even think about that. That's a great point.
So you put him top 4?
Yeah, I think I like Houck the most still. Just after talking about it, I do feel a little bit more uneasy about McKenzie than I thought I would. So I think McKenzie's my 4th, the most expensive. Not sure between Manaea and Paxton as of right now.
All right. Hey, appreciate you guys. Well over 100 likes too. Thank you. Toning for sins here on a Monday morning following Easter Sunday. Couldn't ask for more than that. Remember, Dinger promo, 30% off any package you want. Link down there in the description and chat. Hit me up if you have any questions. Good stuff, brother. You and I will be doing a lot of this at Fantasy Tips Matt on Twitter. Follow him. Me at Lafayette_D. Live before lock coming up tonight. 5 p.m. I think, depending on what time baseball is or basketball. Is it 5, Jordan? Yeah, it should be 5. So I guess deeper dive. Yeah, and then 6 p.m. for basketball. We'll be live on playback as well, sweating some bets and DFS for NBA. So we got you covered across the board. Appreciate you guys hanging out as always. We'll catch you back here tomorrow for another edition of the Stochastic MLB Strategy Show. Peace.